The reason why I'm suggesting that you do this is that by engaging in these activities on a regular basis, you are essentially training a new neural pathway in your brain to become stronger. And you can learn to depend on these neural pathways with greater frequency over time. So in the long run, you will notice a shift in your personality through these habits that support and embody the person who you want to become. You're listening to the Transcendent Farmer Podcast with your host, Emily Reno, a place where we dive deep into the question of accessing land and capital to start a farm. You see, I'm right alongside my listeners, working to start a farm of my own within the next 5 years. And at the same time, I've had a huge travel bug since I was in community college. Back in November of 2023, I sold all of my belongings and became a digital nomad, working as a remote consultant in food systems planning with clients mostly in the upper Midwest and the United States. And I took my mic with me as I traveled everywhere from India to Australia to Costa Rica, digging into stories around mental health and well-being, personal growth, holistic business development, and more. You see, my hunch is that while folks are looking at technical solutions to help the next generation access land and capital to start their farm, such as tax incentives and land access databases, the change that we're seeking has a lot more to do with the non-material. And in my own experiences, my life changed when I started doing the inner work to shift my thoughts, and therefore, my reality. That's why in this podcast, we dive deep into topics like manifestation, energy, and spirit. There's no topic that's off the table, and I'm so excited for you to join me in this journey as I continue to travel, follow my curiosity, and explore the parts of farming that are a bit more taboo and tender. This episode of the Transcendent Farmer Podcast is sponsored by Compeer Financial, a member-owned farm credit cooperative providing financial products and services to support agriculture and rural communities in Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Compeer Financial is the third largest cooperative in the farm credit system. Based in the upper Midwest with $31.9 billion in total assets, they take a forward-thinking approach to provide innovative, customized financial solutions and expertise to meet the unique needs and dreams of those they serve. Contact Sai Tao, Senior Lending Specialist at 612-597-4086 or by email at sai.tao, that's sai.thao, at compeer.com. Compeer Financial is an equal opportunity employer and provider and an equal credit opportunity lender. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Transcendent Farmer Podcast. We have made it to episode number 24, and we will be talking about making the best of financial roller coasters. I had the great fortune of being among many people who have been affected by budget cuts across the United States this last week and had 60% of my income basically terminated overnight. It inspired today's episode. I decided to push off what I would normally be doing of publishing an interview-based episode to prioritize this instead because I felt that it could be more timely and useful to all of you out there. Quick update on the travel front before I dig into things. I know this is always something that is on the minds of my listeners. Where do I find myself in the world today? I am currently calling in from a wonderful Airbnb here in the heart of El Centro Histórico, the historic center of the great city of León. I will be making my way to San Miguel de Allende, which is about, I would say like 2.5 hours. Basically, I guess that would be east of where I am at right now. In the hopes of finding an apartment, I still am on the hunt. I have definitely determined that being in a city of 1.4 million people is not really my style. Just being in a smaller town, I think, is what I'm going for. And also being able to find more nature. That's really important, and water. So with that, I want to kick off things today by asking this question to all of you to think about, but also I wanted to share with you what I believe and how my interpretation of this question is that I end most of my podcast interviews with, which is, what does it mean to be a transcendent farmer? So people that have listened to this podcast up to now, you know that this is what I usually end my interviews with. And today I'm going to center this up in front and use it as inspiration for today's episode. I wanted to offer a bit of my own definition and what this means to me. So transcendence to me carries this essence of beyond the physical plane, beyond things that we can explain in pragmatic or technical ways. And when combined with farming, it's being in tune with the cycles of nature, the uncertainty of it all, right? Investing with your best energy to take care of the land while simultaneously recognizing that it can all disappear or change overnight. It's the grit that is required to keep coming back season after season, improving your systems and processes, and learning to move with the ebb and flow of it all. The same kinds of unexpected shifts that happen in the physical world, in our fields, on our pastures also take place in our financial reality. And in today's episode, I want to offer you a framework for navigating the ups and downs of your financial life, knowing that each phase of your life brings its own phases of stability and instability. For example, you think about when you're in high school, you are maybe getting an allowance or you have a part-time job and you're getting maybe like $400 a month or something from something like that outside of the time that you're spending in school. The priorities that you have around what you spend on that money, for example, your priorities are going to vary drastically from when you are 30 years old and you're suddenly raising a toddler and you need to be thinking about what's coming in, what's going out. You have a budget, right? All of these things are different. And in the same way, your financial sort of ebb and flow will also change. We do not have control over what happens, but we do have control over how we respond. And this framework that I'm going to outline is something that I've developed based on lived experience, hundreds of hours of podcast episodes that I've listened to, books that I've read on the subject of financial literacy, building habits, personal growth, business development, spirituality, manifestation, basically all of the themes of this podcast in general. I am working to combine my learning and distill that down for you. So I also want you to know that this framework can apply to areas of your life beyond finance. So let's dig into the framework. Step number 1 is breathe. Connect to your body. Calm down your nervous system. Tap into your parasympathetic part of your nervous system. Why? As I mentioned in episode number 23, the last episode, you cannot make good decisions when your body is under stress and you are more likely to make mistakes. The same principle applies here. So how might you do this? How might you reconnect with your body? This could be done through meditation, like breath work, pranayama, walking, swimming, yoga, any low impact kind of exercise. I do not necessarily recommend like going for a run, doing high intensity interval training, boxing. This is really great for processing emotions and stress relief. But for this particular exercise, my recommendation would be to focus on bringing your heart rate back down after an activity like this, if that's your forte and that's what you want to do, right? Before you dig into the remaining steps of this framework. The reason is that we're really trying to tap into the side of your nervous system that's in this more kind of balanced state of equilibrium. So speaking of states, we're going to get into step number 2, which is to assess your current state. What is your burn rate? How much further can you go with $0 coming in or reduced income based on whatever situation you're currently facing? And by burn rate, what I mean is that assuming that you change nothing about your current expenses based on either nothing or again, maybe a reduced income, how long can you go? Like how long can you live on that current lifestyle? And you will get a lot of information by looking at that. And so what you would do is you need to take a look at your expenses, look at any of your bank statements, look at your credit card statements. You're going to want to summarize that information of, okay, how much money am I spending on XYZ? If you don't currently have a process or an app, for example, that keeps track of that for you, take the time to look at that. See what you have in savings and try to do that calculation of, okay, how many days, how many weeks, how many months, and that's going to give you some really good information. After that, evaluate if you need to cut any fluff from your existing budget to keep things tighter. And by fluff, I mean stuff that's not necessary for you to live, right? To do your day-to-day. Identify what some of those non-negotiable, maybe extras are. Something that someone else might think is fluff, but for me, it's like bar none. I'm not willing to compromise on cutting this from my budget. For me, that would be my gym membership because I know the positive ripple effect that movement and exercise has on my mental health and stress management. So you may have some of those things in your list as well that you're like, well, some people might think that this is an extra and a luxury kind of item, but for me, this is actually necessary. There are also a lot of things that, for example, and I've done so much work around this in terms of just keeping a really tight budget and understanding what can you make as small shifts in what you're doing on a weekly basis in order to keep more dollars in your pocket. So for example, one of the things that I learned very quickly on, and honestly, this has just become part of a ritual that just brings me joy and is sort of this like grounding practice. When I had access and when I was still consuming oats, and that's a story for another day. Basically every Sunday, or just every weekend in general, every 2 weeks or so, depending on how large of a batch I would make granola for myself every weekend or every 2 weeks. And that became one of the best things that would help me keep my expenses low when it came to breakfast. So I would always have granola, my homemade granola with yogurt, some kind of fresh fruit. And then the other thing that I would also do on either a weekly or bi-weekly basis would be I would make my own homemade chai. And the amount of money that I saved, especially on the chai, right? Because something like that's probably going to cost you maybe $4 or $5 at a coffee shop. The amount of money that I could save by doing that for myself as opposed to eating out was tremendous. And at the time when I was in grad school and I was first starting out, keeping a budget and that kind of stuff, it really, really helped be able to do that. So now we're going to transition to a quick update on something else that I'm building out. Hello, farmers, solopreneurs, and creative thinkers. Have you ever thought about turning your knowledge into an income stream beyond the farm? I am diving into the process of writing, designing, and selling an ebook, and I would love to bring you along for the ride. Introducing From Field to Freelance, a brand new free YouTube series where I document every step of creating an ebook from scratch. No gatekeeping, no fluff, just real practical lessons on how to diversify your income and build something sustainable. If you would like to learn with me, head on over to YouTube, search for mezclada.co, or you can even just look up the Transcendent Farmer. Mezclada will be the first thing that pops up, and hit the subscribe button to start your journey today. This is completely free as an experience. All you have to do is subscribe on YouTube and follow along with the videos that I publish starting next week. All right, so let's get back to the episode. Step number 3, take stock. Outline your resources. This could include networks that you are part of, professional connections, maybe it's savings that you have built up, other things of value that you can sell, etc., maybe side hustles that you currently have or could pursue. My recommendation is to write these things down. If a colleague of yours is in a similar position, maybe do this exercise with them. This could be through conversation, journaling together. And by doing this in sort of collaboration with someone else, it may help spur some additional ideas that you hadn't thought of. The reason why I recommend doing this is that this exercise will help you get into the mindset of abundance. This is absolutely critical. By recognizing how much you already have, it is key. And by taking the time to outline these items, it will help you see just how much is around you. A lot of us do not have a consistent practice of gratitude that basically does the same thing, right? You are creating these new neural pathways in your mind that helps you focus on the good, what you already have, instead of the lack, what you don't have.
This episode of the Transcendent Farmer Podcast is sponsored by Massage Alchemy Botanicals and Turkey Road Farm Products based in Castleton, North Dakota, and owned by Shannon Radcliffe Beach. Shannon is an organic farmer, herbalist, massage therapist, and earth mother. Her mission is to promote health and wellness by connecting people with the healing power of plants. To achieve this, Shannon crafts herbal remedies and products made from the herbs and berries she grows on her farm, as well as hosting events and classes that teach practical herbal knowledge and how to live more harmoniously with the cycles of nature. Find out more about their products and services by visiting their website or following them on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.
Step number 4, create your action plan. I'm going to link an interview that I started listening to yesterday from Diary of a CEO that is particularly helpful for reference on this part of the framework. Everything about this interview that I was listening to confirms the importance of getting unstuck by taking action. And I think that the interviewee, she does such a good job of presenting this in a really eloquent way that I think you will also find captivating. So use the information from steps 1 and 2 to come up with your own action plan. you want to think about the best case scenario of this door closing or whatever rupture has happened to your financial state. Leverage your network, right? When you're thinking about this process in terms of how you are filling out your action plan. So in terms of how, my recommendation is to start by getting really specific. I want you to put down details about dates, times, milestones, who is going to help you accomplish this goal, who is going to serve as an accountability partner to make sure that you follow through. When you are blocking off time, right, on your calendar to do the thing, make sure that you've put aside time to actually do the thing that you're talking about. And consider adding in some kind of additional incentive or maybe even a prize for yourself when you reach this goal that will help you reinforce these good habits. So I created a list of do's and don'ts on this. Do consider bringing other people into this process who are in a similar situation. Tell other people about your goals. Be consistent about baby steps. You don't have to do something crazy overnight all at once. You are going to be less overwhelmed by what is in front of you by chunking it down and making these really small items. And a lot of this is enforced by what I learned from Atomic Habits. I will put that book in the show notes for today so that you have that as a reference. It's a really, really great read or listen if you are an audiobook fan with regards to what will allow you to build habits and also break the habits that you don't like. Next, be somewhat realistic, but also don't forget to dream and set stretch goals. So for example, this idea of like, I'm going to launch a YouTube channel and monetize it in 30 days. For anyone that is not operating in this space and hasn't necessarily done a lot of research around that, the reason why there's a lot of people that would laugh at a statement like that is that you have to get to a certain number of subscribers before you can actually monetize a channel. I think it's like a minimum of 1,000 subscribers before you even get the opportunity to monetize. And that takes time. Unless you already have a huge following in some other platforms and then you're able to translate that to YouTube, for example, creating that kind of goal probably isn't very realistic. That being said, there is a science behind consistency when it comes to content creation. So that may be an area where investing more of your time does make sense because in the long run, that likely is going to pay off for you. My next recommendation would be to lean into things that you love to do, that bring other people joy that they really don't enjoy, and the things that come to you naturally and feel somewhat effortless. The reason is that when you think about not just your burn rate financially, you also need to think about your burn rate energetically. This has been a very hard lesson that I've had to learn over the course of the last couple of years, taking on different types of consulting projects, whether it was web design, logo design, doing facilitation work, doing project management, kind of more administrative type duties. And all of those require a different kind and level of energy from me in order to execute well. Some of those things come a lot easier than others. And for example, if I spend 5 hours working on a design project, I can guarantee you I'm still going to have 5 hours of energy left to put towards something after the workday is over. But if I spend 5 hours on Zoom calls, having one-on-one conversations with people or attending meetings as part of maybe a planning project, there is no freaking way I'm going to have the same level of energy after that. And this has taken a lot of time of just like journaling, self-reflection, self-observation of my own habits and patterns and how there are certain activities that I do that feel like my cup is being filled. I'm being creative. I feel energized by what I'm doing. And then there are other items that just completely leave me depleted. And I have no energy left to give other people after the workday is over. So when you think about the opportunities that are available to you to create financial abundance, you also want to be thinking about how that is in relation to your own energy levels. And again, what is it that is bringing you joy, that makes you feel light afterwards, versus the things that make you feel depleted and drained. The reason is that you want to be creating a pathway that allows you to carry this stamina into what you are doing. Because if you go ham on something and suddenly you're just so depleted, there's going to be no way for you to sustain that financially. And I don't think a lot of people focus on that. So that's just word of advice based on my own experiences. Let's move on to the don't list. This is related to incentives because that was one of the suggestions I had is like, okay, well, if you're making progress on this thing, you do want to create some kind of internal incentive for yourself to just that like extra push of encouragement, right? But if you struggle with an addiction to sugar, for example, don't make your reward for reaching your goal going out for ice cream or some sugary treat. Maybe think about experiences, recreational activities, sharing quality time with others. I do not recommend being super hard on yourself when you don't reach a goal by a certain time. The point here is to be taking action in the right direction. Lastly, do not be afraid to revise your action plan. By creating these feedback loops for yourself and continuing to evaluate, like, am I on track? Do I need to change something? And taking this spirit of experimentation towards what you are doing, you will have so much more fun in the process. And you won't be in this position of, like it didn't work out and nothing ever goes right. The first thought pattern gets you into this bigger spiral and spinning that talks a lot about, just almost takes this perspective of victimization. And that's something that I want to help pull you out of and get you into this more positive mindset and thinking and always looking towards the brighter side of what could be on the other side of this. If you would like a worksheet for this process and creating this action plan, leave a review for this podcast episode and then send me a message or an email and I will create a worksheet for you and send that your way. And now let's talk about a resource that may help you reach your goals. If you are not in a dire situation and you have a fairly long burn rate, a resource that I would like to point you to is the 60-Day Financial Fitness Challenge. This is a free resource that is available through Mezclada's blog and is a self-paced challenge in which you are tasked with doing one thing every single day over the course of 60 days to get you closer to your financial goals. Whether this is paying off credit card debt, creating a budget, tracking monthly expenses, positioning yourself to apply for a loan or a grant for your farm. This was designed for people like you who are aspiring to start a farm business one day and need to work on their financial foundation before they can reasonably do so. I'm going to make sure that the link to the challenge is included on the webpage for this episode as a reference. And now let's get back to our framework. Step number 5, take care of your mental state of being. Lean into practices, habits, rituals that will help you stay in a good headspace and continuously embody the feeling of what it's like to be on the other side of this challenge. So how might you do this? Some good headspace suggestions that I have for you might include exercise, cooking, recreational activities such as hiking, biking, walking, dancing, spending time with friends, meditation, yoga, working with plants or getting your hands in the dirt. Go visit a plant nursery to be surrounded by green things. And if you're living in a city, find a way to get out, right? Go find a piece of nature. Maybe go for a picnic. When it comes to embodying the feeling of what it's like to be on the other side of the challenge, what I'm talking about is that feeling of having already accomplished your goal. Maybe you can do a visualization meditation. You could take actions from the perspective of the person who has already reached their goal, not who you feel or act like on a regular basis currently. For example, let's say I decide I'm going to purchase one high quality food item when I'm going grocery shopping instead of going for the cheapo, off-brand, or discounted item. When I think about the person who has the financial abundance that I am working towards, they're not looking at those pennies, right? They're not pinching pennies. They're thinking about quality. Sometimes when I do this, I actually get so overwhelmed with gratitude that it brings tears to my eyes. And this has happened fairly recently, actually. And I don't know if it's just because I've cultivated such a strong sense of gratitude within myself, but it's become so much easier for me to imagine, for example, a hug from somebody who has maybe taken a yoga class of mine that I've taught, or maybe it's seeing someone in person for the first time that I've, had a relationship with for a long time virtually, or maybe I've maintained a friendship or something at a distance for a super long time. and just that feeling of getting a warm embrace and like a kiss on the cheek from them, and how lovely it is to just kind of hold that person in my arms. This is what I'm talking about, right? The way that getting into that zone can make your voice shaky, right? With emotion, because you truly feel it before it's ever happened. That is what I'm talking about. The reason why I'm suggesting that you do this is that by engaging in these activities on a regular basis, you are essentially training a new neural pathway in your brain to become stronger. And you can learn to depend on these neural pathways with greater frequency over time. So in the long run, you will notice a shift in your personality through these habits that support and embody the person who you want to become. So an example of this, while I definitely still struggle with sweets, just in the last 3 weeks of attending group fitness classes at the gym here locally, 5 days a week, and going to a city park to jog over the weekend, I've gotten into the best shape of my life. I'm starting to do headstands that I could never do before in yoga class. My energy levels are consistently high. And I feel like this piece of me that struggled a lot around consistency with exercise is becoming more of a lifestyle. It's just who I am, right? I can now say very proudly, I am a healthy person. That's just who I am at my core, as opposed to, just this thing that I pursue once in a while. So the same thing applies to money habits when it comes to my financial habits. I started the habit of categorizing my expenses on Sundays when I first moved out of my parents' place and started living on my own because I had to keep a budget. I didn't have extra money, right? I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for my living expenses, and what I did have in savings was being used for my books, things that my scholarship for my degree didn't cover. So this became a habit that I've since carried into my business and helps me keep tabs on what's coming in, what's going out, looking ahead to project and see what my cash flow will look like several months in the future. I learned to do this because my cash flow in my consulting work is incredibly volatile. And not to mention what obviously has just happened with my federal government contract. But having been in a place where I burned through almost all of my emergency savings, and just an aside here, that was the reason why I created the 60-day financial fitness challenge. I learned that I really don't like that feeling in my body with that level of financial strain. So what did I do? I started keeping just this maniacal track of my finances and doing a lot more projecting further into the future than most people probably would, because I wanted to be able to think through, okay, how am I planning ahead for not having any income during this month, or not having that invoice paid for 5 months, for example. I wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to one of the Transcendent Farmer Podcast's newest sponsors, the Fargo-Moorhead Wellness Collective. The FM Wellness Collective is a community of wellness practitioners in the Fargo-Moorhead area dedicated to supporting and empowering one another. They serve as a reliable resource for the community to connect with wellness professionals, making wellness more accessible and strengthening the culture of well-being in the Fargo-Moorhead area. Learn more by visiting the links in the show notes or finding the collective on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Let's move on to step number 6, surrender. Trust the process. Lean in. If you pray, pray. If you meditate, meditate, right? The idea is to trust in sort of the higher powers that be, the flow of life. Continuously practice the affirmation that this is happening for me, not to me. And by doing this, I guarantee that you will be much better off than most folks who are paralyzed into inaction and looping on negative thought patterns that attract even more negativity into their life. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening, wherever and whenever you find yourself listening to this. And please do share with a friend or family member that you believe may benefit from this information. We got to hold each other up, right? Lift each other up and support each other with resources and information that helps us on our path to becoming transcendent people, transcendent farmers, weathering the storm no matter what takes place.
If you love this conversation as much as we did, feel free to share the love by passing it along to a friend or fellow farmer, and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. Until next time, friends.